Because there's another important subject we'll be talking about, that is Gwadar. But before we actually have a discussion on the Gwadar port issue, let's watch this report.
Pakistan's cabinet formally agreed to transfer the operational responsibility of the strategically located Gwadar port from Port of Singapore Authority International to China's overseas port holdings on the 30th of last month. The step has been taken after PSA International and Pakistan Navy fell out over land transfers. Gwadar port is situated at a strategic location at the apex of Arabian Sea and the mouth of the Persian Gulf. It is also only about 400 kilometers away from the Strait of Hormuz, a key global oil supply route. Indian Defence Minister A.K. Antony expressed concern over the transfer. China has negated any such notions, saying that the port development was not an attempt by the Chinese side to encircle India. The Chinese Foreign Ministry had also defended Beijing's decision to take over the Gwadar port operations as it is a part of continued cooperation between the two countries. Gwadar was built by China, but during its operations by PSA, it barely attracted any commercial traffic. There is also a lot of port development that remains to be done. Pakistan expects China to complete that construction in record time, given its past performance. For China, Gwadar could also be a conduit for energy flows into northwestern China by transporting oil and gas from the port through pipelines that traverse Balochistan and the federal agencies to feed into China's Xinjiang province.
Pakistan has handed over the running of the port to a Chinese
The
company.
operations.
The operations.
Okay.
And the way it did to Singapore, this PSA, right? Now, there was an agreement with PSA which said they will invest $550 million over a period of time and make more berths and all. They just didn't do anything.
Why was that so?
Because they got a lot of concessions. I mean, if you look at the list of concessions, you will be surprised. Everything was tax-free. Everything was, given to them, etc. Water, gas, whatever they can think of.
To my knowledge, I mean, they were giving actually allocating lands to Japan.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But they did not capitalize.
But they did not do that, and therefore, the point is that you have a port here. Now, let me give you the strategic importance of this port. Just consider yourself the situation in the Gulf. Every time you hear a war situation, you say, oh, they can put ships in the blockade the Gulf by sending ships there, right?
The Strait of Hormuz.
The Strait of Hormuz. So now what you have is, you have a port outside the Strait of Hormuz, which is land-based, which does not need to go around across any water to Iran. It goes land-based straight to this thing. What is happening is the new great game. The old great game was Russia and the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. The new great game is China and the warm waters of the Indian Ocean. I, as a helicopter pilot, 42 years ago, 43, much before you were born, was flying down the Karakoram Highway, working with the Chinese, two PLA divisions which were making the road. At that time, my interpreter, who became ambassador here later, Chiang, he says, you Pakistanis don't understand anything. He said, we will come to this port because we can only go through Myanmar to the Indian Ocean, or we can go through Pakistan to the Indian Ocean. So we are geostrategically very important. Now, this port becomes important for China for their energy deficiencies. What they have done is that right up to Kashgar, they have brought in high-speed trains. They have broken through tunnels as long as 15 miles long. So can you imagine the importance if they come through the Karakorams now into the plains of Punjab and into the...
It is always believed that whosoever controls the Indian Ocean controls the world. You're talking the warm waters, or you're talking about the oil route. So we have with us Mr. C.D. Uday Bhaskar from India. Mr. Uday, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Well, your defense minister has shown some serious concern regarding the handing over of the operations of the Gwadar port to the Chinese. What's wrong with that, sir? Isn't that considered, shouldn't that be considered an internal decision of Pakistan?
No, I'm sure that this is, legitimately and rightly so an internal decision of Pakistan. But I think the context in which the Indian Defence Minister may have made his remarks, that needs to be seen in the appropriate perspective. I think, as you said, I don't think anybody would sort of make a case about what is purely a bilateral decision between Pakistan and the Chinese entity in this case. But if the quote that you have is one of concern, I think that has its own, if I may say, relevance in the light of the larger regional context. I mean, as an analyst, that is how I would characterize it.
So your exact statement was that your defense minister, Mr. Anthony, considers, rather thinks, and he has this serious concern that the Indian western frontiers would be very vulnerable if this port is handed over to the Chinese. What sort of vulnerability do you think he's talking about?
Well, I can only conjecture and make the case that in the event that this particular port or the asset now has a very enhanced Chinese presence, then the ability for surveillance is accordingly enhanced. Now, I'm sure that you would be aware or familiar that at sea, one of the perennial challenges, which is frankly as old as the seas themselves, is the ability to detect or monitor or have surveillance. And I think if one could make a reasonably persuasive case to say that given the geography of Gwadar, that if you are able to locate the equivalent of current technologies in surveillance, then it does provide a certain enabling capacity. So that's the manner in which I would interpret the concern that has been expressed by the Indian Defence Minister.
There's another concern here. In Honbanat Tota in Sri Lanka and in Chittagong in Bangladesh, the Chinese have proposed and are also working. So India has never raised voice regarding those ports. Why in particular about Gwadar? Do you think it is going to challenge the supremacy or the naval so-called power, or it will be a challenge for the Indian Navy in the region? Because they're looking into for the blue waters now.
No, see, let me put it this way again. I think this is not a question of India either seeking or trying to claim any kind of quote-unquote supremacy. The quote that you have read out is really, I think, an expression of a certain degree of concern. Now, for any maritime domain awareness kind of matrix, location is a very, very important ingredient, as you would agree. So to that extent, if you are able to have access in the Indian Ocean, now China, as we know, is a Pacific Ocean power, and it has its own compulsions for wanting to get some kind of access or toehold as far as the Indian Ocean is concerned. Now, all the facilities that you have mentioned, for instance, in Sri Lanka, whether it's Hambantota, or the possibility that China may be able to have similar kind of access, whether it's in a Myanmar or in a Bangladesh, or for that matter now in Pakistan, where Gwadar is the immediate port that's been identified. What it does is really to enable China and Chinese entities. Now, let me make this point that in this particular case, we are still talking about the management of the port having been awarded to a Chinese entity. So to that extent, I do not think that this immediately translates into the equivalent of a military capability as of today. But it does have the potential, and I think that is where you might like to contextualize the concern that has been expressed.
Anyway, thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
So do you think India is working against Gwadar port?
I think India has a dual role in this. One, it has its own concerns, right, which is not really of relevance to them because it's our territory, we can do what we want with them. We don't ask them any questions when they go and look for oil in the South China Sea next to the disputed islands between Japan and China. At the same time, yes, the long-term interest which has been of the United States in this area is to contain China. And therefore they are building up India as a relevant power in this area.
Look at the allies. I mean, they've been with Vietnam, Cambodia. You talk about Taiwan. I mean, America, they are doing their own lobby out there.
Right. This is big power strategy, and they've got every right to do that. Every country does it out of its own interest.
But when China does it, there's a problem.
Right. No, but the China, like Commander Bhaskar has very nicely explained that it's no threat because it's just a management of a port. Yeah. Now, if the Chinese will have to have a military presence there, which they have not said at any time that they're going to have a military presence, and really they would not need a military presence.
It's more about economics.
Yes, economics. Yes. The whole thing is economics, and frankly speaking, I think for us it's a gold mine, frankly, because can you imagine if you have a conduit from the Indian Ocean right into China, right? First of all, the transit money that you get. Number two, your own products can go this thing. Number three, the products that can come from Central Asia, South, the products can go from here to Central Asia. So it's a win-win situation for us. PSA out of Singapore was not doing what it was supposed to do. As opposed to the $550 million PSA was supposed to give in and had not done, the Chinese are putting in $10 billion, right? Now, that's, good God, that's 20 times more, right? And which many more berths are going to be, containers are going to be, container terminals are going to be, RO terminals are going to come in. So it's a different ball game completely. Let me tell you one thing just. The countries within the Persian Gulf are not very happy.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because Dubai, it affects those ports. Because just imagine, next time there's a crisis in this area, you can have...
Even Iran, you know, the port of Bandar Abbas, do you think that is going to affect as well?
Shah Bahar, actually. The thing, you know, so you've got these super tankers, they can come, offload the oil here, and then small tankers can ferry them into the...
And finally...
Central Asia.
Yes.
I think
so what impact do you think Gwadar port will have on the Pakistan-China relations? Do you think
tremendous.
Okay.
We are a great friend of China, and China is a great friend of ours, and why should anybody be unhappy about it?
Okay, but why do you think there was such slow progress on it, on operational and effectiveness?
I think basically, you know, you're very right on this issue. You know, we tend to slow down everything. Now, you know, we have two-phase project. The first project was about $300 million when they developed the port. This next project, $9 million. That project from 2007 to 2012 still not come to fruition. Right? The thing is, there's a lot of government lethargy, the administrative bottlenecks, you know, paperwork, shuffling around. These things, you know, when legitimate interests, economic interests of the countries are at stake, you have to steamroll over this and cut through the red tape and do what you have to do.
I think this is a high time for
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you very much.